The imperial palace on Vorkath Prime gleamed under the light of its dying star. Every surface reflected the crimson and gold of empire, from the polished floors to the ceremonial armor of the guards standing motionless along the Victory Hall. Today, the color meant something different. Today, it meant blood. Emperor Thraxon sat upon his throne, his scaled face twisted into what passed for satisfaction among his kind. His advisors had spent the last 3 hours feeding him numbers, casualty reports, territorial gains, and projections. The war was over. Humanity had been crushed at New Horizon. Their last great fleet shattered, their colonies burning, their homeworld isolated and defenseless. "The humans are finished, Majesty," said General Kor, his voice dripping with the arrogance of victory. "Their military capacity is zero. Their population is fractured. We have achieved total strategic dominance." Thraxon inclined his head, "And yet I feel no satisfaction." The hall fell silent. Advisors exchanged nervous glances. Kor's scales paled slightly. "Majesty." Thraxon rose from his throne and descended the steps, his claws clicking against the ancient stone. He moved to the holographic display at the center of the room, where the Battle of New Horizon played in endless loop. Human ships, small, ugly, jury-rigged things, threw themselves against the Imperial Armada with a ferocity that bordered on madness. "Watch," Thraxon commanded. The hologram showed a human cruiser, its hull already breached, turning directly toward an Imperial dreadnought. It didn't fire. It didn't maneuver. It simply accelerated to maximum velocity and rammed. The explosion consumed both ships. "Again," Thraxon said. The hologram reset. The cruiser rammed the dreadnought. Again, again, again. Each time the same result. A human ship sacrificing itself to destroy something larger, something more valuable. Commander Vex stood at the edge of the assembly, his position deliberately peripheral. He was not a warrior. He was a tactician, a cold analyst of battlefield data, and his talents had earned him the Emperor's ear during the war. But today, he felt the weight of something he could not name. "Commander Vex," Thraxon said, his voice cutting through the murmurs. "You have been silent. Tell me your thoughts." Vex stepped forward, his scales darkening with unease. "Majesty, I have reviewed the battle data extensively. There are anomalies." "Anomalies?" Kor scoffed. "The humans are broken. What anomalies could possibly matter?" Vex ignored him. The human fleet at New Horizon was composed almost entirely of older vessels. Their power cores were stripped. Their shields were minimal. They possessed no support infrastructure, no supply lines, no escape protocols. Thraxon's eyes narrowed. "And what does that tell you?" "It tells me they were not fighting to win, Majesty." Vex met the Emperor's gaze. "They were fighting to die. Every ship, every soldier, every pilot. They entered that battle knowing they would not return." The hall erupted in murmurs. Kor stepped forward, his hand on his weapon. "This is treasonous talk. You dare suggest our victory was meaningless." "I suggest nothing," Vex said, his voice measured. "I only observe. A species that deploys its entire remaining fleet as a sacrifice. What does that say about their psychology? What does that say about what they have left to lose?" Thraxon raised a hand, silencing the room. "Continue." Vex called up additional data. Holographic projections showed the human colonies that had been pacified in the weeks before New Horizon. They had been evacuated. Not completely. There were always stragglers, always the desperate and the trapped, but the majority of human civilians had simply vanished. "We assumed they fled," Vex said. "We assumed they were running, but look at the pattern." The hologram zoomed out, showing the entirety of human-controlled space. The colonies that had been abandoned formed a perimeter, a barrier. Behind that barrier, a vast empty region of space that contained only the asteroid belt and the dying remnants of their outer planets. "They are not running," Vex said. "They are consolidating. They sacrificed their fleet to buy time, to make us believe they were broken while they gathered their strength somewhere we cannot see. Kor laughed. You speak of strength, from what? Their economy is destroyed. Their industry is rubble. They have no resources, no allies, no hope. You are seeing ghosts, Commander. Thraxon studied the hologram for a long moment. Then he turned to Vex. And what do you believe they are gathering, Commander? Vex hesitated. He had spent his entire career analyzing alien warfare, studying the strategies of conquered species. Humans had always been different. They fought with a passion that bordered on obsession. They adapted faster than any enemy the Empire had ever faced, and they never, ever surrendered. I do not know, Majesty, Vex admitted. But I know this: every species we have conquered because they valued their lives more than their freedom. The humans, they do not appear to value their lives at all. The hall was silent. Even Kor had no response. Thraxon returned to his throne, his expression unreadable. Then we will prepare. Commander Vex, you will lead an investigation into these anomalies. Find me the truth. Find me what they are hiding. Vex bowed. Yes, Majesty. As he turned to leave, he caught one final glimpse of the holographic display. The Battle of New Horizon played on, human ships dying in waves, their crews screaming into the void as their vessels turned to fire. And in that moment, Vex understood something the Emperor and his generals could not. The humans had not lost that battle. They had won it. They had won it because they had achieved exactly what they intended. They had made the Empire arrogant. They had made them blind. And now, while the Empire celebrated its hollow victory, the real human force was out there somewhere, building something terrible. Something that was coming for them all. 3 light years from the wreckage of New Horizon, in the dark heart of the asteroid belt, General Aileen Torres watched the Imperial victory broadcast on a stolen relay. The image showed Emperor Thraxon delivering a speech to his people, his words dripping with triumph. Human ships burning, human bodies floating in the vacuum, human worlds reduced to ash. The Empire celebrated their greatest victory, their final pacification of a species that had dared to resist their expansion. Torres turned off the display and looked around the room. She was standing in what had once been a mining facility, carved into the side of a massive asteroid. The walls were rough-hewn rock, reinforced with salvaged metal and desperation. 50 men and women filled the space, their faces gaunt from rationing, their eyes burning with a fire that had nothing to do with hope. This is the moment, Torres said, her voice cutting through the silence. This is the moment we were waiting for. She walked to the center of the room, her boots echoing against the metal floor. She was not a tall woman, but she carried herself like a mountain. Her uniform was patched, her hair streaked with gray, and her left arm ended in a crude prosthetic that she had built with her own hands after the evacuation of Ceres. The Empire thinks we are broken, she continued. They think they won. They think the Battle of New Horizon was our last gasp, our final desperate stand. She paused, looking at each face in turn. These were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They were miners, engineers, scientists, and refugees. They were people who had lost everything and had chosen to fight instead of flee. But we know the truth, Torres said. New Horizon was never meant to win. It was meant to die. Every ship, every soldier, every pilot who died in that battle died because they believed in something greater than themselves. They died to buy us time. They died to make the Empire believe we were finished. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Torres held up her hand. 3 years, she said. 3 years we have been building in the dark. 3 years we have been salvaging, training, and preparing. 3 years we have been waiting for this moment. She gestured to the holographic display behind her. It showed the known layout of Imperial space, their supply lines, their military outposts, their communication relays. Every piece of intelligence they had gathered, every piece of data they had died to obtain. The Empire is vast, Torres said. But it is also arrogant. It believes its technology makes it invincible. It believes its numbers make it unstoppable. It does not understand what it is fighting. She activated a new projection. This one showed a ship, a human ship, but unlike any the Empire had ever seen. It was angular, brutal, and bristling with weapons. Its hull was covered in scars, not from battle but from construction. Every surface had been welded, bolted, and reinforced by hand. "This is the hammer," Torres said, "and it is the first of many." She watched the faces of her people light up with recognition. They had all worked on this ship. They had all bled for it. They had all sacrificed to see it completed. "The hammer is not a ship of war," Torres said. "It is a ship of vengeance. It is a ship of consequence, and in 3 days it will begin its first mission." A woman in the front row raised her hand. "What is the mission, General?" Torres smiled, a hard, cold smile that did not reach her eyes. "We are going to remind the Empire what it means to fight humanity." She activated another projection, this one showing a massive Imperial supply depot at the edge of Vorkath space. It was heavily defended, filled with fuel, ammunition, and food that the Imperial fleet needed to maintain its occupation of human worlds. "This depot," Torres said, "is the Empire's lifeline. Without it, their supply lines collapse. Without it, their fleets starve. Without it, they will have to choose between fighting us and feeding their soldiers." A man in the back spoke up. "How many people are stationed there?" Torres looked at him, her expression unreadable. 10,000, mostly support personnel, few combat troops. "And we're going to destroy it." "We're going to burn it," Torres said. "Every ship, every structure, every resource. We will leave nothing for the Empire to salvage. We will make them understand that every world they take, every life they claim, will cost them 10 times more than it is worth." The room fell silent. Torres could see the conflict in their faces, the desire for vengeance warring with the knowledge of what they were about to do. "These people are not innocent," Torres said, her voice hardening. "They are the machine. They are the ones who keep the Empire running. They are the ones who provide the fuel for the ships that bomb our worlds. They are the ones who process the resources stolen from our colonies." She walked to the edge of the gathering, her prosthetic hand clenching into a fist. "I have lost everyone," she said. "My husband died at New Horizon. My children died during the evacuation of Mars. My home is a cinder, and I am not the only one. Every person in this room has lost someone. Every person in this room has a reason to hate." She turned to face them fully. 3 days, she said. 3 days until we strike back. 3 days until the Empire learns what it means to wake a sleeping giant." A cheer erupted from the crowd, raw and fierce. Torres allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, but as the cheers faded and her people began to disperse, she felt the weight of what she had just done. She had just sent them to war, and she had no idea how many of them would come back. Commander Vex stood in the wreckage of a human cruiser, surrounded by the dead. The ship had been designated the Rapier. It had been destroyed during the Battle of New Horizon, its hull torn open by Imperial fire. Now it drifted in the debris field, a tomb for its crew and a museum of human desperation. Vex had brought a team of scientists and engineers to examine the wreckage. He had expected to find evidence of human weakness, poor design, faulty systems, desperate improvisation. Instead, he had found something that disturbed him deeply. "Commander," called one of his scientists, a young female named Lyra, "you need to see this." Vex floated through the wreckage, his magnetic boots clamping against the metal deck. The interior of the ship was a nightmare of twisted bulkheads and frozen bodies. Human corpses drifted in the zero gravity, their faces preserved in expressions of terror and determination. Lyra was examining a section of the ship's power core, or rather, what remained of it. The core had been removed, its housing filled with a series of smaller components that Vex did not recognize. "What am I looking at?" he asked. Lyra pointed to the components. "These are improvised explosives, crude but effective. They were designed to detonate when the ship's reactor reached a certain temperature." Vex felt his scales prickle. They rigged their own ship to explode. "Not just this one," Lyra said. "We have examined 17 wreckages so far. Every single one had similar modifications. The humans who flew these ships knew they were going to die. They wanted to take as many of us with them as possible." Vex floated in silence for a long moment. He had studied many species in his career. He had seen desperation. He had seen fanaticism. He had even seen species that engaged in ritual suicide rather than surrender. But he had never seen anything like this. "This was not a battle," he said quietly. "This was a sacrifice." He moved deeper into the wreckage, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. The bodies grew thicker here, human crew members who had been caught in the initial attack, their bodies frozen in poses of final defiance. One body caught his attention, a human male, his face frozen in a snarl. His hands were still clutching a control panel, his fingers locked in place by the cold. Vex leaned closer and saw that the panel was covered in writing, human script, hastily scrawled. "Translate this," he ordered. One of his aides moved forward, a translation device in hand. He scanned the writing and waited for the device to process. "It says," the aide paused, his scales paling. "It says, for those who come after, we did not run, we did not surrender, we made them pay for every step. Remember us, avenge us." Vex stared at the words. They were not the desperate pleas of a dying species. They were a message, a promise, a declaration of intent. "The humans knew they were going to lose," he said. "They knew their fleet would be destroyed, and they did it anyway." He turned to his team. "Search the rest of the wreckage. I want every piece of data you can find, every log, every transmission, every scrap of information." The scientists dispersed, moving through the wreckage with practiced efficiency. Vex remained where he was, staring at the frozen human and his message. What kind of species writes a message like that? What kind of species fights a battle they know they cannot win, not to survive, but to send a message to the future? He thought about the Empire's other conquests. The Zalori had surrendered after a single battle. The Krell had negotiated a peace treaty when their homeworld was threatened. The Jaren had fled into the void, abandoning their colonies to save themselves. But the humans had done none of these things. They had fought, they had died, and they had left behind a message that was not for themselves but for their descendants. "You are either the most foolish species in the galaxy," Vex said to the frozen human, "or the most dangerous." His communicator crackled to life. "Commander, we have found something." Vex pushed off from the control panel and floated toward the source of the transmission. He found his team gathered around a sealed compartment in the rear of the ship. The door was locked, but the scientists had already cut through the metal. Inside was a small room, barely large enough for a single person. A table dominated the space, and on the table was a data crystal, carefully protected in a reinforced container. Vex picked up the crystal and examined it. It was undamaged, clearly placed here deliberately. "These crystals are designed to survive the destruction of the ship," Lyra said. "They are intended to be recovered." Vex inserted the crystal into his portable reader. The device hummed to life, and a holographic image appeared before him. It was a human male, older than the others he had seen. His face was lined with age and fatigue, but his eyes burned with an intensity that made Vex take a step back. "To whoever finds this," the human said, "if you are Imperial, I hope this message fills you with fear. If you are human, I hope it fills you with hope." The human paused, his gaze dropping for a moment. When he looked up again, his eyes were wet. "New Horizon was a sacrifice. We knew that. We accepted that. But we did not sacrifice ourselves for nothing. We sacrificed ourselves so that others could survive, so that others could rebuild, so that others could continue the fight. The human leaned closer to the camera. The Empire thinks they have defeated us. They think we are broken. They think we will kneel, but they are wrong. They have only met the beginning. They have only seen what we were willing to give up. They have not yet seen what we are willing to become. The hologram flickered, and the human's face hardened. There are more of us, there are better of us, and we are coming, not to win, not to conquer. We are coming to destroy everything the Empire has built. We are coming to make them pay for every life they have taken. The human smiled, a cold, terrible smile. Tell the Emperor that humanity is not defeated. Tell him we are just getting started. The hologram ended. Vex stared at the empty space where the human's face had been, his mind racing. He had been right. The Battle of New Horizon had been a diversion. The humans had sacrificed their fleet to make the Empire believe they were broken. And now, somewhere in the darkness of space, they were building something else. Something that was coming for them. "Commander," Lyra said, her voice trembling, "what do we do?" Vex turned to look at her, his expression grim. "We return to Vorkath Prime," he said, "and we tell the Emperor that the war is not over, it has only just begun." The asteroid belt was cold, dark, and silent. For 3 years, it had been the only home that Captain Marcus Webb had known. He stood on the observation deck of the Hammer, watching the endless procession of rock and ice drift past the viewport. Somewhere out there, in the vast emptiness of space, his family was dead. His wife, his daughter, his son. They had been on Mars when the Imperial fleet arrived. They had been in the evacuation shuttles when the Empire destroyed them. Marcus had been on a military outpost in the asteroid belt when the news arrived. He had been 27 years old, a junior officer with a promising career ahead of him. Now he was 30, and his career was not promising. It was bloody. "Captain." Marcus turned to see Lieutenant Vega approaching. She was young, 23, barely out of training, but she had seen more combat in the last 2 years than most soldiers saw in a lifetime. Her face was scarred from the evacuation of Ceres, a permanent reminder of what they had lost. "Admiral Kine wants to see you," Vega said. "The briefing is in 15 minutes." Marcus nodded and followed her off the observation deck. The corridors of the Hammer were cramped and utilitarian, every inch of space maximized for function. There were no luxuries here, no comforts. Every spare resource had gone into weapons, armor, and propulsion. They arrived at the briefing room to find Admiral Kine already present. Kine was a large man, broad-shouldered and balding, with a presence that filled the room. He had been a senior officer in the old Earth fleet, and he carried the weight of command with a gravity that demanded respect. "Captain Webb," Kine said, gesturing to a seat at the table. "Good, we can begin." Marcus took his seat and looked around the table. The other captains were present, their faces grim and focused. They represented the core of the momentum, the surviving officers who had rallied around Kine in the aftermath of New Horizon. "The supply depot at Vorkath's edge," Kine said, activating a holographic display. "This is our target." The display showed a massive structure, dwarfing the ships that surrounded it. It was a hub of Imperial logistics, a vital artery in the Empire's supply chain. "This depot contains enough fuel, ammunition, and food to sustain the entire Imperial fleet for 6 months, Kine continued. "Without it, their supply lines collapse, their fleets starve, their occupation forces become stranded." A captain on the other side of the table spoke up. "What's the defensive situation?" 40 defense platforms, 6 cruisers, and a complement of small craft, Kine said. "Lightly defended by military standards. The Empire does not expect an attack this deep into their territory." "They will after we hit them," another captain muttered. Kine nodded. "Yes, they will, but by the time they react, we will be gone. We will strike, we will burn, and we will vanish back into the darkness." Marcus studied the hologram, his mind working through the tactical implications. The depot was heavily defended, but the Empire had clearly prioritized quantity over quality. The defense platforms were older models, and the cruisers were undermanned. "We'll need to hit them fast," Marcus said. "Hard, overwhelm their defenses before they can scramble a response." Kine nodded. "That's exactly what we're going to do. We'll split into two strike groups. One will engage the defense platforms and cruisers. The other will deliver the payload." Marcus felt a familiar cold settle into his gut. Payload. Kine's expression did not change. "A seismic charge, 200 megatons. It will destroy the depot and everything within 1,000 kilometers." The room fell silent. Marcus had known what they were planning, but hearing it confirmed was something else entirely. 200 megatons, Marcus said. "That's not a military strike. That's an extinction event." Kine met his gaze. "The Empire does not understand cost. They take, they consume, they destroy. They have never been made to pay for their actions. We are going to teach them." Marcus wanted to argue. He wanted to say that there were innocents on that depot, that the destruction would be indiscriminate, that they would be no better than the Empire. But then he remembered his wife's face, his daughter's smile, his son's laughter. He remembered the evacuation shuttles burning in the atmosphere of Mars. He remembered the scream of the dying. And he said nothing. "We have 72 hours, Kine said. Prepare your ships, prepare your crews, and prepare yourselves." The captains filed out of the briefing room, their faces grim. Marcus lingered, staring at the holographic display of the depot. "Captain Webb," Kine said, his voice softening, "stay a moment." Marcus turned to face the admiral. Kine looked older than he had a year ago, the weight of command etched into every line of his face. "This mission is personal for you," Kine said. "I know that, I know what you lost, but I need you to remember something." Marcus waited. "We are fighting for survival," Kine said. "We are fighting for the future of our species, but we are also fighting for something else. We are fighting for the right to mourn, to grieve, to remember. We are fighting so that our children's children will know what we sacrificed for them." Marcus nodded slowly. "I understand, Admiral." "Good." Kine placed a hand on his shoulder. "Because I need you to lead the strike group. I need you to be the one who delivers the payload." Marcus felt the weight of the assignment settle onto his shoulders. He had wanted vengeance. He had dreamed of it. But now that it was here, now that it was real, he wasn't sure he was ready for it. "When do we leave?" Marcus asked. 24 hours, Kine said. "Get some rest, Captain, you're going to need it." Marcus left the briefing room and walked back to his quarters. The corridors were empty, the crew sleeping in shifts to conserve energy. He reached his door and paused, his hand resting on the entry panel. He thought about his wife, he thought about his daughter, he thought about his son. He thought about the message the rapier had left behind. "For those who come after, remember us, avenge us." "I will," Marcus whispered. "I promise." He stepped into his quarters and closed the door behind him. The room was small, barely large enough for a bed and a desk. On the desk was a photograph of his family, taken 5 years ago on a beach on Earth. Marcus picked up the photograph and stared at it for a long moment. Then he put it back on the desk, lay down on his bed, and closed his eyes. In 24 hours, he would become a killer. In 24 hours, he would destroy a depot and everyone on it. In 24 hours, he would start a war that would define the rest of his life. But for now, he slept, and in his dreams, he saw his wife's face, and she was smiling. The hammer emerged from hyperspace with a violent shudder, its systems groaning under the strain of the jump. Marcus Webb gripped the armrests of his command chair, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The depot filled the screen, a massive structure of metal and light against the darkness of space. Defense platforms bristled with weapons, their targeting systems already locking onto the human ships. "We're spotted," Vega reported. "They're scrambling fighters." Marcus nodded. "Strike Group Alpha, engage the defense platforms. Strike Group Beta, form up on me. We're going in." The human ship split into two groups, their engines flaring as they accelerated toward the depot. The defense platforms opened fire, their weapons filling the void with streams of energy and projectiles. "Shields at 80%, Vega reported. "Hull integrity holding." Marcus watched the tactical display, his heart pounding. Ships were dying around him. The Empire's defenses were more formidable than they had anticipated. "Strike Group Alpha is engaging the platforms," Vega said. "They're taking heavy losses." Marcus gritted his teeth. He had known there would be casualties. He had known this was a suicide mission. But knowing and accepting were two different things. "Push through," he ordered. "We're almost to the depot." The hammer shuddered as an energy bolt struck the hull. Alarms blared, and Vega's voice cut through the noise. "Damage to the port side. We've lost a weapons array." Marcus didn't respond. He was focused on the depot, his mind calculating the trajectory of the seismic charge. 30 seconds to target," Vega reported. "Hold the course," Marcus ordered. "Do not deviate." The hammer accelerated, its engines screaming as it pushed through the Imperial defenses. The defense platforms were focused on Strike Group Alpha, their attention divided. 20 seconds. Marcus could see the depot clearly now. It was enormous, a city of metal and light floating in the void, and it was about to die. 10 seconds. "Captain," Vega said, her voice trembling. "We have incoming. Cruisers Vector 27, they're launching fighters." Marcus ignored her. He was fixated on the target. 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1, release. The seismic charge detached from the hammer's hull, its engines igniting as it accelerated toward the depot. Marcus watched it go, his heart pounding. "Get us out of here," he ordered. "Maximum burn." The hammer turned, its engines flaring as it attempted to escape. But the Imperial cruisers were already closing in, their weapons firing. "Shields are collapsing," Vega reported. "We can't take much more." Marcus watched the tactical display, his mind racing. The seismic charge was still accelerating toward the depot. They just needed to hold on for a few more seconds. 5 seconds to impact, Vega said. Marcus closed his eyes. He thought of his wife, he thought of his daughter, he thought of his son. And then the world exploded. The seismic charge detonated, unleashing a wave of energy that consumed the depot and everything within 1,000 kilometers. The Imperial cruisers disintegrated. The defense platforms evaporated. The fighters vanished. And the hammer was thrown across the void, its hull groaning under the force of the blast. "Damage report," Marcus managed to say, his voice hoarse. "Hull integrity at 40%, Vega reported. "We've lost primary engines. Life support is failing." Marcus looked at the tactical display. The depot was gone, everything was gone. They had done it. They had struck back. "Strike Group Alpha?" he asked. Vega's face was pale. "Gone, Captain, we're all that's left." Marcus nodded slowly. He had known the cost. He had accepted it, but seeing it, feeling it was something else entirely. "Send a distress signal," he ordered. "We need to get out of here before the Empire sends reinforcements." "We have a signal," Vega reported. "It's Admiral Kine. He's coming to pick us up." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his body trembling with exhaustion. They had done it. They had struck the Empire. They had made them pay. But as the hammer drifted in the void, its systems failing, Marcus couldn't help but wonder. Was it worth it? Emperor Thraxon stared at the holographic display in stunned silence. The supply depot at Vorkath's edge was gone, vaporized. 10,000 Imperial personnel, 6 cruisers, 40 defense platforms, all of it had been consumed in an instant. "What?" Thraxon said, his voice dangerously quiet, "happened?" Commander Vex stepped forward, his scales pale with fear. Majesty, we believe the humans launched a strategic strike. They deployed a seismic charge that destroyed the depot and everything in the vicinity. Thraxon's claws dug into the armrests of his throne. The humans we defeated at New Horizon, the humans we broke, those humans. Vex swallowed hard. Yes, Majesty, those humans. Thraxon rose from his throne, his eyes burning with rage. How did they survive? How did they build a weapon of that magnitude? How did they get past our defenses? Vex hesitated. We underestimated them, Majesty. The fleet at New Horizon was a distraction. They sacrificed their ships to make us believe they were defeated while their real force gathered strength in the asteroid belt. Thraxon's hand shot out, grabbing Vex by the throat. You knew, you warned me, and I ignored you. This is my fault. Vex tried to speak, but the Emperor's grip was too tight. Thraxon released him, turning back to the holographic display. What do we do now? Thraxon demanded. How do we crush them once and for all? Vex coughed, rubbing his throat. Majesty, the humans have proven that they are more dangerous than we believed. They are willing to sacrifice everything. They have nothing to lose. And what would you have me do? Thraxon snarled. Retreat, surrender, bow to these animals. No, Majesty, Vex said quickly. But we must change our strategy. We cannot fight them on their terms. We must draw them out, force them to engage us on our ground. Thraxon's eyes narrowed. Explain. Vex moved to the holographic display, calling up a map of human-controlled space. The humans have consolidated in the asteroid belt. They are using it as a base of operations. If we attack them there, we will be fighting in a maze of rock and ice, where their small ships will have the advantage. He expanded the map, showing the systems surrounding the asteroid belt. But if we threaten their homeworld, Earth, they will have no choice but to come to us. They will have to defend it. Thraxon studied the map, his rage slowly cooling into calculation. You want to use Earth as bait? Yes, Majesty. We send a fleet to Earth not to conquer but to threaten. The humans will be forced to respond, and when they do, we will be waiting for them with everything we have. Thraxon considered the plan. It was risky. Earth was heavily defended and the human fleet might be more powerful than they had anticipated. But if it worked, it would end the war once and for all. Prepare the fleet, Thraxon ordered. Every ship, every soldier, we will end this. Vex hesitated. Majesty, there is something else. What? Vex called up the message from the rapier. The human's face appeared, his words cutting through the silence of the throne room. The humans believe they are fighting for survival, Vex said. They believe they are fighting for the future of their species, and they are willing to die to achieve their goals. Thraxon watched the message, his expression unreadable. When it ended, he turned to Vex. They are not fighting for survival, Thraxon said. They are fighting for revenge, and revenge is a luxury they cannot afford. He looked at the holographic display, at the map of human-controlled space. Prepare the fleet, he repeated. We will end this, and when we are done, there will be nothing left of humanity but ashes. The Imperial Armada emerged from hyperspace in a blaze of light. Hundreds of ships, from massive dreadnoughts to nimble cruisers, filled the void of the Proxima system. They were the largest fleet the Empire had ever assembled, and they were ready for war. Admiral Kine watched the Armada form up on his tactical display, his expression grim. He had expected this. He had planned for this, but seeing it was something else entirely. Admiral, his communications officer, reported. The Empire is hailing us. They want to negotiate. Kine shook his head. There is nothing to negotiate. Send the signal. The communications officer nodded, sending out a single encrypted transmission. It was the signal they had been waiting for, the signal that would activate the trap. In the darkness of the asteroid belt, a network of gravitational generators powered to life. They had been built in secret, hidden among the rock and ice, and they were designed to do one thing: tear the Imperial Armada apart. The first wave of Imperial ships entered the kill zone. The gravitational generators activated, distorting spacetime and ripping the ships apart from within. Cruisers crumpled like paper. Dreadnoughts shattered into 1,000 pieces. Fighters evaporated. "What is happening?" Emperor Thraxon demanded from his command ship. "What is that?" Commander Vex stared at his instruments, his scales pale with terror. "They have harnessed gravity, Majesty. They are tearing us apart." Thraxon's face twisted with rage. "Fire everything. Destroy those generators." The Imperial fleet opened fire, their weapons lashing out at the asteroid belt. But the generators were shielded, hidden deep within the rock. The Empire's shots were wasted on empty space. And then the hammer fell. The human fleet emerged from hiding, their ships sleek and deadly. They had been built for one purpose: to destroy the Empire. And now they had their chance. "All ships engage," Admiral Kine ordered. "We will not stop until every Imperial ship is destroyed." The battle was brutal and asymmetric. The human ships were faster, more maneuverable, and more heavily armed than the Empire had anticipated. They fought with a ferocity that bordered on madness, sacrificing themselves without hesitation to destroy their enemies. Captain Marcus Webb piloted his ship through the chaos, his eyes scanning the tactical display. The Imperial command ship was ahead, its shields shimmering under the assault. "That's our target," Marcus said. "All weapons fire." The hammer unleashed its arsenal, energy bolts and projectiles slamming into the Imperial command ship's shields. The shields held, but they were weakening. "Shields at 40%, Vega reported. "We need more firepower." Marcus looked at his tactical display. The other human ships were engaged, fighting their own battles. He was alone. "Ram them," Marcus said. Vega turned to him, her eyes wide. "Captain." "We ram them," Marcus repeated. "It's the only way." Vega hesitated, then nodded. "Aye, Captain." The hammer accelerated, its engines screaming as it drove toward the Imperial command ship. The Empire's weapons focused on them, their energy bolts tearing into the hammer's hull. "We're going to die," Vega said. Marcus nodded. "I know." He thought of his wife, he thought of his daughter, he thought of his son. He was finally going to see them again. The hammer slammed into the Imperial command ship, its reinforced bow punching through the shields and into the hull. The impact was catastrophic, sending both ships spinning into the void. Marcus was thrown from his chair, his body slamming against the bulkhead. He felt something crack, heard the scream of tearing metal, and then everything went black. Marcus opened his eyes to find himself staring at a gray ceiling. He tried to move, but pain lanced through his body, pinning him to the bed. He was in a medical bay, surrounded by the beeping of monitors and the soft hum of life support. "You're awake," a voice said. Marcus turned his head, wincing at the effort. Vega was sitting beside him, her face bruised and her arm in a sling. "What happened?" Marcus asked, his voice a rasp. "You rammed the command ship," Vega said. "You killed Emperor Thraxon." Marcus closed his eyes, absorbing the information. He had done it. He had killed the man who had destroyed his family. "The Empire?" he asked. "Defeated," Vega said. "We won, but at a terrible cost." Marcus opened his eyes and looked at her. "Admiral Kine." "Dead," Vega said. "He went down with his ship. Most of our captains are dead. We lost half our fleet." Marcus felt the weight of her words settle onto his chest. They had won. They had beaten the Empire, but the cost was astronomical. "Earth?" Marcus asked. "Safe," Vega said. "The Empire's fleet was destroyed. Their threat is gone." Marcus nodded slowly. He had achieved his vengeance. He had made the Empire pay. But now that it was done, now that it was over, he felt nothing but emptiness. "There's something else," Vega said. "Commander Vex is alive. He's our prisoner." Marcus turned to look at her, Vex. He knew, Vega said. He knew what we were planning. He tried to warn the Emperor. He tried to save his people, but Thraxon wouldn't listen. Marcus considered the information. Commander Vex had been the one who had seen through the diversion at New Horizon. He had been the one who had warned the Empire. What do we do with him? Marcus asked. Vega shrugged. That's up to you. He wants to talk to you. He wants to understand. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his choices pressing down on him. He had wanted vengeance. He had gotten it, but it had come at a terrible price. Bring him to me, Marcus said. Vega nodded and left the medical bay. A few minutes later, she returned with Commander Vex, his hands bound and his scales pale. Marcus studied the alien. Vex was smaller than the other Imperials, his features more delicate. There was intelligence in his eyes, a keen awareness that set him apart from the warriors Marcus had fought. You knew, Marcus said. You knew what we were planning. You tried to stop it. Vex nodded. I knew, but no one listened. The Empire was too arrogant to see the truth. Marcus was silent for a long moment. Why did you try to stop it? Vex met his gaze. Because I knew you would win. I knew you would destroy us, and I wanted to save my people. Marcus stared at him, searching for any sign of deception. He found none. Vex was telling the truth. You still lost, Marcus said. Yes, Vex said, because your people are willing to sacrifice everything. Mine were not. Marcus felt a cold chill run down his spine. He had never thought of it that way. The humans had won because they were willing to die. They had won because they had nothing to lose. And now that they had won, now that the war was over, what would they become? What happens now? Vex asked. Marcus looked at him, his expression unreadable. Now we rebuild, we mourn, we remember. And then... Marcus turned away, staring at the ceiling. And then we make sure this never happens again. He stood, ignoring the pain in his body, and walked to the viewport. Through the glass he could see Earth, blue and beautiful and alive. The Empire had tried to destroy it. They had failed. But as Marcus stared at his homeworld, he knew that the war had changed them. It had made them harder, colder, more willing to do terrible things in the name of survival. We are not the same species we were, Marcus said. We have been forged in fire. We have been shaped by loss, and we will never be broken again. He turned back to Vex. You will be tried for your crimes, Marcus said, but you will be treated fairly. We are not monsters. Vex nodded, his expression unreadable. Thank you. Marcus watched as Vega led Vex out of the medical bay. Then he turned back to the viewport, staring at Earth. The war was over. They had won. But as Marcus Webb looked at the blue orb of his homeworld, he knew that the real battle had only just begun. The battle to remember who they were. The battle to become something better. The battle to prove that humanity was worth saving. And he would fight that battle. Because that was what humans did. They fought. And they won.